So one of the things that we like to do at the end of every show is our top five. So last week we did top five fast food French fries. This week we're going to get back on the sports side. Top five NFL running backs of all time. And now I'm very passionate about this. And my list, I've seen 4 out of the 5 players that I'm going to put on this list, and like I've seen them play the game. Unlike you,
I've seen one, I think.
Yeah. So you go ahead. You go first.
So I'll go first, like you said. One of
go 5 to 1. So you're starting
lowest to highest. One of, in my opinion, the best players to never win a Super Bowl. And my number 5 position in my top 5 for running backs, greatest running backs of all time, is Barry Sanders. I think
Barry Sanders at number 5.
Yes, I think he is an absolute stud of a player. I think he is, just untouched in that role. When it comes to running backs that didn't win a Super Bowl, he's up there. And I think if him and Emmitt Smith, were switched, I think he would have won just as many Super Bowls. I think Emmitt Smith benefited a lot from being on a winning culture. My number 4 position, as a Rams fan, got to go with Eric Dickerson.
I love the goggles, upright running back.
Yep. I think he holds the record for all-time rushing yards in a season. If I remember correctly, it's like 2,000 yards, somewhere in there.
It was like 2,100. Yeah.
So, and he's also up there in one of the best running backs of all time that has never won a Super Bowl. So Eric Dickerson, number 4. Number 3, a player who doesn't have a very long career, but that career was very impactful, and that's Bo Jackson at number 3. He only played, I think for like 3 or 4 years. But
he is the greatest athlete I've ever seen play sports. I'll just put it to you that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only reason he's not higher is because he only played for 3 or 4 years.
Well, and the thing is, he if that injury happened today, he would have came back and played.
Yeah.
But because of when it happened in 1990, I think.
90 to 1.
And he basically his leg came out of his hip socket, and because he had so much torque, and when he got tackled, it ripped out.
Yeah.
And like I said, if that happened today, he might not be the same player, but he would have came back.
Yeah. Number 2, face of one of the most prestigious awards in the NFL, Walter Payton. He has a Super Bowl MVP. Oh, sorry, I think he won a Super Bowl. He won
a Super Bowl
MVP. I think he's won the MVP, like the NFL MVP. Hall of Famer, 15,000 career rushing yards, something like that. So, and obviously, like I said, is the face of the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So he's number 2, and then number 1, probably the best. Obviously, in my opinion, the best running back of all time. Probably a lot of people's best running back of all time is Jim Brown. I'm pretty sure he won the NFL MVP 3 times. And he just has I think he won a championship, right?
He won several championships with the Browns.
Yeah, but they weren't the.
They were in the NFL. No, it was pre-Super Bowl.
It was pre-Super Bowl. So they won
NFL
the championship.
It was in the 50s.
Yeah. So he won the championship a couple of times, and he won MVP a couple of times, which nowadays running back will never win MVP. It'll be very difficult. Maybe CMC could have, but you know, and he, in my opinion, is just enshrined in the Hall of Fame. He's
So
the best running back to ever play the game.
So my list and your list, 4 out of the 5 are the same. We're just in different orders.
Okay.
All right. So my number 5 is the 5th all-time leading running back in yards. You talk about, we talk about generational talents. He's a guy I remember watching his first game in the NFL for the Vikings. And he broke a run, and I said, this guy is different than anybody else I've seen in a long time, and that's Adrian Peterson.
He's the first off my list.
He is a guy that I just remember he was a load to bring down, could make cuts. I mean, he tore his ACL and came back and rushed for 2,000 yards. Like, he is a man. Now, towards the end of his career, played for a lot of different teams. Never won a Super Bowl, but he is by far, he's got to be in my top 5. Number 4, the all-time leading rusher in the NFL, Emmitt Smith. Now, the thing with Emmitt is, Emmitt wasn't that big, wasn't that tall. Early in his career, he played for the Super Bowl winning Cowboys, which, never hear that again, anymore. But played behind arguably one of the greatest offensive lines in NFL history. It was the greatest line of his time. Won 3 Super Bowls. Had a Hall of Fame quarterback in Troy Aikman, Hall of Fame wide receiver Michael Irvin. Had a all pros all over the defense. I mean, that was obviously won 3 Super Bowls in the '90s. Was a dynasty. So. But I put him a 4th on my list because, like you said, if he was on another team, would he be that great? And that's hard, that's I mean, we'll never know. But if he got drafted by the Dolphins, would he have? He still would have been a great player, but would he have been what he turned out to be? Number 3, this is the only player I never saw in person. Is a guy that changed the game. We just talked about him, especially for minority players. So you don't, what probably you didn't even kind of put together is Jim Brown being a black player coming into the league in the 1950s, being as dominant as he was. I mean, he was basically a man among boys, dominating. And there's an article. So you know who Maury Povich is? The guy, so his dad used to write for the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. There's an article after the Browns absolutely destroyed the Redskins back in the 50s. The Redskins were the last team to bring in black players. And there was no black players on this team, and they won by several touchdowns, and he ran up and down the field. And basically it was this is why you go out and bring in a player like this. And he absolutely did change the game. And he led the league. When he retired, he was a leading rusher of the NFL and changed the game. And, he did that in playing 12 games a season. Yeah. Number 2 is Sweetness, Walter Payton. One of the greatest running backs I've ever seen. Had one of the best, biggest hearts. He was taken too early from us. Obviously the Walter Payton Award is named after him. But he is, was on that Bears team that was known for their defense. They didn't always have the best offensive guys. And one of the biggest tragedies in NFL history was they blow out the Patriots in the 1985 Super Bowl, and he does not score a touchdown. They're on the goal line, and they give it to the fridge. He scores a touchdown. He does not get in. I think Mike Ditka even said later, like that was one of his biggest regrets was not, getting Walter Payton into the end zone during the Super Bowl. But I mean, when he retired, he was the all-time leading rusher in the NFL until Emmitt Smith broke his record. But yeah, just ultimate gamer. Number one to me. Well, before I get there, honorable mention for Bo Jackson. Like I said, greatest athlete I've ever seen, and just a guy played both, football and baseball. Was an All Pro in both. Um, if you don't know a lot about Bo Jackson, go watch his 30 for 30. And what's funny is I watched it with your brother Ethan a couple of years ago, and I did not tell him what was going to happen to Bo Jackson. And when we got to the injury, Ethan was almost like, "Oh my gosh, like, are you serious?" And the guy still came back and played baseball and made an All-Star team.
Yeah.
So honorable mention to him, and I think what his career's done, Derrick Henry might be on this list.
I agree. I agree.
So honorable mention to him. But number one to me is the greatest running back I've ever seen is Barry Sanders. The guy could, you talk about making turns in a phone booth. The guy would make people look silly. And the thing is, he only made it to the playoffs a couple times. He beat the Cowboys in the playoffs in 1991. Then lost to the Redskins before they went to the Super Bowl. But he, was probably one of the greatest running backs of all time on one of the worst teams and retired early. Emmitt Smith said if he didn't retire, I never would have broke that record. Barry Sanders would have ran away with it.
Yeah.
So that's why I put him at number one. And it's funny, we talk about the Lions right now and, how lovable they are in America's team. The Lions have been terrible for decades, and they made two of the best players at their positions, and Barry Sanders and Megatron Calvin Johnson, retire early because of how bad their organizations were.
Yeah.
And your quarterback came from that organization and finally got to win a Super Bowl after, losing in the playoffs I don't know how many times. So, but Barry Sanders, if you haven't, seen his highlights, go look it up on YouTube, or actually go watch. There's a documentary about him.
Yeah.
I think it's on Prime or Netflix. I think it's called Barry. But go watch that, and because this is the thing with Barry Sanders, he still has NCAA records to this day.
And they played
plus years ago.
Yeah.
Almost 40 years ago, that still stand today when he played at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
He was just, outstanding. So anyway, that's my top five.